beautiful intro to this segment where we discuss the economic case for LGBT inclusion in the Caribbean and basically how we in Trinidad and Tobago are we as diverse as we claim to be, because we talk about being happy with the mix of cultures in Trinidad and Tobago, and we're so diverse. But are we really? I'm being joined by the co-chair of PrideTT, Hanamji, and also Liam Rezende, who is a trustee for Open for Business, to discuss these two very important matters, especially since we're in July, but June is typically Pride Month. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, dear listeners.
Hi, good morning, Sweetie. Thanks so much for having me.
So I wanted to start with Rudolph as co-chair for PrideTT. Do you think that Trinidad and Tobago has become more LGBT inclusive in recent years? And what do you think is the current state of inclusivity in Trinidad and Tobago as it relates to LGBT plus people?
I would have come out, Sohini, when I was about 15, and I use that term loosely. I just started living my true identity because I had certain privileges that allowed me to do that. And I was saying to another media station last week that the first time I experienced discrimination really was in the schoolyard. Many of my colleagues had learned prejudice and they bullied me because of what their parents had taught them. And it's strange that Liam and I on this call, because he was my junior at QRC, and there were many other students, thankfully, and teachers who supported me as an openly gay student, perhaps the first openly gay student at the college. So I'm speaking from that vantage point almost 22 years ago. Trinidad and Tobago has come a long way. There is the younger generations in particular are more informed in their own right, and even older people have moved away from some of the prejudices that they once used to divide our country. I mean, you have leaders finally speaking up for the community. They need to do more of it. And you actually have a lot of people who are allies showing their support and representation during Pride Month, for example. We saw a lot of allies posting in support of the community. However, there is still a segment of the society that is focused on division, and that is centered, unfortunately, within, and I want to be very clear, specific religious organizations. They have continued to hold on to dogma and very archaic teachings to promote a culture of hate and oppression. The same teachings that once supported things like slavery, female mutilation, and many other oppressive positions in the world. So that is still there, and we see it rearing its head. But Trinidad and Tobago, for the most part, is very welcoming, open, and loving of its LGBTQI persons because we have contributed to the national development.
I'm going to bring in Liam into the conversation in a little bit, especially with respect to national development. But as you brought it up, because you said certain religious organizations remain very hostile, there was a lot of outrage as a group of NGOs and regional churches came out to criticize the U.S. Embassy for flying the Pride flag. What's your comment on that?
Well, I believe the word they used was disgusted. Yeah. Well, we are disgusted too. We are disgusted that there is still pedophilia taking place, especially within churches. We are disgusted that there's rape and gender-based violence. We're disgusted that the economy is impacted, especially in marginalized communities by COVID-19 in particular. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to go around when one needs to be disgusted. But they are pushing a very false narrative, and it's ironic that they are peddling lies when they claim to be religious people, because the pride flag has been raised in this country by Trinidad and Tobago nationals for donkey's years, over 30 years. As I said, when I was growing up as a child, there were many people in the community like Cyrus Sylvester and Sharon Motley who were raising that pride flag. And many people have died over the years. Sasha Fierce, for example, advocating for our rights in Trinidad and Tobago. This just happened to be the first time in our history that the U.S. Embassy stood with us, as our government should stand with us, and did the same. So this is nothing new to us, but again, they are using these narratives because they are losing ground with their following, because many people of the LGBTQ community are members of faith, and the congregations support its family. Families are starting to support their children more. We need to see more of it, because there are still families who, based on the advice of their religious leaders, some of religious leaders are putting their children out and forcing their children to be homeless and to harm themselves. So let us use religion for what it's good for, and not for peddling this narrative that somebody has come and told Trinidad and Tobago that we must fight for human rights. That is happening right here at home, Soyini.
Yeah, and it's funny because we are actually showing video when you were speaking just now of local Pride. A few years ago, we would have had to use video from Pride elsewhere, and this is Trinidad and Tobago nationals, or definitely people in Trinidad and Tobago proudly wearing and flying the same Pride flag that a lot of these groups came out against. But you were talking about including LGBT people in the development of the region, Trinidad and Tobago, in the wider region. And this is where I want to bring in Liam Rezende, because he is part of Open for Business. Liam is joining us from London, and they just put out a paper arguing the economic case for LGBT inclusion in the Caribbean. And I think I saw a figure that LGBT prejudice is costing us $4.6 billion, and this is US dollars a year.
Yeah, so Ian, again, thank you so much for having me. And I think it's funny, and Rudy touched on it before. This narrative is perpetuated that this is a foreign concept, when at the end of the day, I am from Trinidad. I was born and raised in Trinidad. I went to school in Trinidad, and I'm a gay man. We exist. And Open for Business, who put out this report yesterday, is a coalition of global companies that make the case that inclusive and diverse societies are better for business and better for economic growth. And what we see is, the largest data collection of LGBT plus people in the Caribbean that we were able to base this report on. So I think to Rudy's point, I just want to make something very clear, that LGBT plus discrimination is a significant human rights concern, first and foremost. But what we have been able to confidently present is that LGBT plus legal and social exclusion carries specific economic tolls. And as you rightfully pointed out, Soyini, we've estimated that this cost of discrimination amongst 12 of the English-speaking Caribbean CARICOM countries is up to 5.7% of our annual GDP, or $4.2 billion a year. Now that is a tremendous number, and when we built that by identifying the extent of diminished human capital, health disparities, losses of labor output, experiences of violence. Rudy has talked about that, as well as the constraints on tourism. And what we're also able to identify for the first time is to show this LGBT plus brain drain. And one thing I want to quickly touch on that Rudy mentioned is, I think in the Caribbean we are very hopeful, because there are a lot of, aside from that religious organization that put out that statement yesterday, there are a lot of voices within the region that are seeing not only the moral imperative but also the business case for this. And in the research we spoke to over 21 business leaders across the Caribbean. And we found that the business leaders in the Caribbean are increasingly articulating how LGBT plus inclusion contributes to better business outcomes. And there's an emerging yet significant business-minded approach to addressing issues of LGBT plus inclusion in the workplace, and even sometimes in the community. So, I think we need to be very careful when when this narrative is perpetuated that this is a foreign concept, or B, that this is not hurting our economy. And as we think about COVID-19 and the way that the Caribbean has been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, we literally cannot afford to discriminate. And I think when you look at the report, and I invite business leaders, policymakers, academics, activists, civil society to look at the report, and you know, we really hope that that report will be able to equip and empower activists and advocates within the region to help see the change that is not only desperately needed, but I think is a very right time now.
Now, Liam, of course, we are chatting to you in London, and one of the things that this report looked at is how discrimination is contributing to our brain drain in the region. I wanted to maybe ask you a personal question. Is that something that you have experienced? Do you think that you would have been as safe and successful if you had remained in Trinidad and Tobago?
When you said a personal question, I thought you were going to ask me if I was single, Sweeney, but the answer is yes. But I will tell you, I think that, you know, it's funny when people ask me, will I ever move back to Trinidad? And I do have to pause sometimes, because I think about, you know, my life here and the fact that I'm able to live openly and be who I am. And I am, you know, I have an incredible sense of belonging in my workplace. And I think what we were able to see is that we found that, because we also surveyed LGBT plus people within, Caribbean people within the diasporas of the UK, US, and Canada. And what we found is that these LGBT plus people from the Caribbean have more education, more financial freedom, more wealth, ability to live openly as LGBT plus. So what we've seen is that LGBT plus skilled workers migrate and go and stay in more open societies, and this is leading to lost human capital, productivity and output, and also just less competitiveness.
So I wanted to bring back Rudolph into the conversation. Rudolph, as a co-chair of PrideTT, and of course your mandate is to really normalize LGBT people and activities in Trinidad and Tobago. We are seeing more businesses. Scotia had an ad specifically for June. I was actually really surprised to see Kenwin Jones in the ad as an ally. Because, you know, we have this notion of who are and aren't allies in Trinidad and Tobago, and I think it was really important to speak to a lot of our men who are into sports and very masculine, and let them know that that is an avenue for them as well. I also saw an NGO, Silver Lining Foundation, had a really nice campaign talking about trying to get parents to be nicer to their children. How do you feel as an LGBT person in Trinidad and Tobago living right now? Are you hopeful for our present and our future?
I'm very hopeful. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, when I see younger people like Liam taking lead on these matters, and I remember inheriting from former leaders in the community their work and continuing it, Trinidad and Tobago has a great opportunity to demonstrate that we truly are the rainbow nation. I mean, our indigenous people believed in the two-spirit. Many of our religions allow for it. Last year and this year, we had and are having an interreligious panel of religious leaders who actually choose to promote love and the acceptance of the LGBTQ community. So I'm very hopeful. I believe that my experience may be one where certain privileges and insulations assisted me in navigating being an openly gay man in Trinidad and Tobago and still being successful. But that's not everyone's experience. Some of us have to use our privilege, as Liam and I are, to speak for those who can't speak for themselves, those who are not protected by workplace policy and the Equal Opportunities Act, which has to be amended, and have lost their jobs. People of the trans community who have been beaten up, they've been forced to take their lives in some instances, because they just don't have a place in this society. But we're all taxpayers. We've all contributed to the nation. As a matter of fact, a gay man designed our national flag, Carlisle Chang. So when we look at our country and we look at what we're trying to build and what we say we are, where every creed and race find an equal place, etc., I think that the younger generation gives us that inspiration. They are living more truth to power than ever before. And I think that leaders in all sectors of society are listening up. And we just have to maintain that efficacy of communications and encourage other allies, as you said, especially cisgender heterosexual men, because women have always been our allies. And I must say that gay men, there's a lot of stereotypes about gay men, but some of my best friends, they can pass for straight men, and other straight men are surprised to find out that they are actually gay. So we have to also break down those gender stereotypes about who's gay and who's straight and who's binary and non-binary. But there's a lot of hope that we must hold on to in these dark times.
Thank you so much, Rudolph Hanamji, co-chair of PrideTT, and also Liam Rezende, trustee for Open for Business, for bringing a truly Trinidadian perspective to this very important discussion, because it always it's always my preference for us to discuss these issues with reference to our real lived realities here in Trinidad and Tobago. Gentlemen, thank you so much and have a fantastic day.
Thank you, you too.
Have a great day.
Okay, so we are going to take